Hi everyone and welcome to my review of Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps in 1935. This is my first Hitchcock film to review on this channel, and finally it's happened. I'm going to start, not in order, but I'll be doing a director series of his films. Any of them that I watch or rewatch from now on, they'll be up on this channel reviewed, once I see them. And yes, I've really been looking forward to this because Hitchcock, let's say now, is one of my top 5 directors. Top 4 actually, I'll let you in on that. Yes, he really is pretty much the best director for me of all time, from what I've seen. Apart from 2 in particular, I think are still better than him, from the body of work that I've seen. And another director, is really close. So he's pretty much the the 3rd best for me so far that I've of directors I've actually explored their work of. And yes, Hitchcock, everyone knows who Hitchcock is, and he's made so many, every decade really, even the 20s, he made some things like The Lodger and stuff. He's had his decades where he's just made a spree of kind of acclaimed films and revolutionary films, masterpieces. I've seen 16 of his films now, and it kind of began 2 years ago where I properly started amassing some of his films and then watching them. And films like Vertigo, Rear Window and stuff, properly watching them. I'd seen Psycho and The Birds actually since, from the age of 10 roughly, or something like that. And I'd seen them multiple times, especially Psycho. Of course that's his most well-known one, Psycho and stuff. But yes, these are his British films. 39 Steps. It's acclaimed as the greatest version of this. And it's citing sound polls and everything and stuff. They all say this is one of the 10 best British films, really. And Hitchcock would soon move on to American films, really. Go to Hollywood with films like Rebecca, which was his first American film, I think, 1940, which I have seen, and I can't wait to review that. But yes, this is it's considered his first masterpiece, instant masterpiece, you could say. There's a couple of others before that. Some would say so as well, but this is his first one where really worldwide and everything, people recognised him for being a true genius, really. And I saw this most of this actually many years ago, but properly I watched it last year, and then I've just rewatched it tonight. Yes, I love this film. It's so good. It's just really flawless for me, and it's not the best of Blu-ray transfers once again, ITV Studios thing. But yes, this film is stunning, and I love classic thrillers, especially ones with romances in them, and stuff. And actually, The Third Man is another one which I absolutely love. That's kind of like a triangle, though, you could say. It's a bit different. But this is an adventure film. This is a mystery thriller. It's a comedy. It's a romance, and it's got everything you really want. And it's just got that classic charm as well. And it's quite different from his later films. This and The Lady Vanishes, which was one of his other British films in the 30s. Very different, but still absolutely stunning Hitchcock, and just full of likeable characters, a British charm, and just so tense throughout. Many called him, of course, the master of suspense, and you can't argue with that. But I don't think he's just the master of suspense. I think he's one of the masters of romance, action actually. With films like North by Northwest. Actually, a lot of other things. It's hard to actually define action. A lot of his films kind of are without being full on action. I'll get to that. And he's also a master of horror. And comedy. He's most of his films have always got some sort of wit throughout them that kind of, there's a lot of irony and stuff. But also just, North by Northwest especially, and films like that. There's always a lot of comedy in them. But they're always as well so tense. So it's just the way he balances everything out. But this film, it's quite famous, the story. The 39 Steps. Yes, and basically, very early on, the main character, protagonist, played by Robert Donay, he kind of he gets wrongly accused of murder of a woman. You know, it's the first 10 minutes or so that this happens. A woman that he kind of meets up with, and she's kind of starts talking about the 39 steps and what it is. Not well, adding some mystery there. You know, you don't really find out what it is till later on in the film, and you know, it's kind of still a MacGuffin. You know, but yes, he wrongly accused of the murder of her, and then basically he's on the run. He's on the run for a lot of the film, and then he eventually ends up in Scotland, and back to London and everything. It's just as well he meets this woman who he kind of you know that's the main romance of the film. Eventually, played by Madeleine Carroll. She basically eventually they form a romance, and it just all plans out. At the end, it's a very short film. 85 minutes or something, and it's just such a stunning thriller, really. And yeah, the characters in this film. I've said before, that I love thrillers, but really it has to be thrillers have to have characters that I can root for, because a plot, a complex plot or an interesting plot is not enough for me, really, with any film. But thrillers, I've seen a couple of thrillers. That first of all they emphasise the plot more than the characters, or films that they get too wrapped up in their plot, too talky. I think The Big Sleep, I've actually seen a couple of months ago. I did think it was a good film, but that's an example of a film I think got way too wrapped up in its plot, got way too convoluted, and it didn't let the characters at times to shine through and stuff. Although I did like that film, and there was good characters at times, but a film like that it just gets too, I think it got too wrapped up in its plot and everything. It was way too heavy on that. This was the perfect balance, really. This film of character and plot, and it also has a romance in it that you can root for. But yes, the character played by Robert Donay is just such a likable character. You see him very early on in the first scene. He's he's a charming guy, and he just very likable, and I just rooted for him throughout the whole film, and always just on your edge of your seat, because not just the actual suspense of it all and the way it's been shot, and everything and the way it builds, but because you really care about this character, as he started, and you just don't want anything to happen to him and stuff. Even though with every film, really, every great film, if you know what happens, it's still suspenseful. And Hitchcock. Now, the way he directs this film is masterful, and although there's one Hitchcock film of the 16 I've seen that I wasn't, wowed by, I still thought it was masterfully directed. To be honest, the way he directs his films is just on another level, really. And his eye, the way he directs the camera, it's just pure cinematics, really. And a lot of the time, it's very simple. The way he kind of moves the eye and stuff. It's just sometimes just natural, just primitive responses and impulses you get. But it's so masterfully done and so perfected, really, the style, that it's just it just elevates things. Rear Window, for example. That's a masterpiece. That's a spoiler for when I do that review. It is one of the most perfect films ever made. And it's simply just Jimmy Stewart in his apartment, looking at different things. You're just seeing what he's seeing. It's so involving, though, because of the pure cinematics that Hitchcock was onto, just mastered. And there's nothing really that kind of once you've done that, once you've mastered pure cinematics and you've got likable characters and stuff, you can't go wrong. Really, for me, you can take the simplest of plots and everything and just elevate them. This is a bit more of a a bit more of a complex plot, but again, Hitchcock never really emphasised too much on the plot and the actual intricacies. For the most part, it was always just the simplicity of cinema, actually. Like Ozu, just very different, of course, because there's always loads of cuts and camera moves. Very different to Ozu, but kind of the same thing. The simplicity of it. Just natural. Just responses. That Hitchcock just knew psychology as well, and how people respond to certain shots and stuff, and how they feel. And just this is just another example of that. It's just pure cinematics, quite simple in that sense, but just mastered. The way he directs the film, it just moves with such a flow for every act. And it's just as well. He takes his time at the beginning to just establish everything and build the mystery, and then just keep it, sustain that mystery of really what the 39 Steps fully is. And it is still, you do find out most of what it is at the end, by the end of the film. It's still a bit of a MacGuffin, if you know what I mean. And yes, he would do that quite a lot. But yes, it's just a stunning film. The characters are so good. Madeline Carroll as well. She's great in this film. The romance is earned though as well, and it's a bit. At first she doesn't quite take to him, and she's kind of annoyed at him and stuff, and then eventually they do kind of form it, and it's just much more meaningful in that way, in that sense. But as well, it's good that you see Robert Donay on his own for a lot of the film, and just as well, just the way that this, the thing I caught on straight away, the way it just progresses. But it's kind of an adventure, but all the different people he meets along the way, they're not always like massive scenes, but they're always so memorable. And it's just all the people he meets as well. They're always quite layered characters. They're not just random people that are just 1D, which could have easily happened. They're always always can't remember and feel something for them. Especially the one early on in Scotland. That couple in the that little in that little house and stuff. You probably know what I mean. That was just so good, so well done. And this film is just always so suspenseful. There's always loads of twists and everything, and just times where you just see Robert Donay just like looking around, and then there's someone around the corner. Everyone's after him for most of the film, and it's just so suspenseful, just constantly, and it builds and builds, and definitely a satisfying finale. But it's just such an enjoyable film. It's so warm. I cannot state that enough. It's so warm. There's so much charm in the film through the characters and everything. And as well, it's such a good script. It's just constantly engaging, the script alone, and the editing is just masterful, really. And it's just a wonderful film. It's a romantic film. It's a funny film. It's suspenseful, really suspenseful. It's just as well. Just the way he shoots the film, it's stunning. And I really think this is a true masterpiece. And it may be just a quick little light film in that sense. Some may consider it to be, but I think it's actually one of the best films of all time for me. And I've actually said that about a lot of I won't ruin too much because I have seen 16 Hitchcocks basically. I won't say what they are, but 15 of them I absolutely love. And really, I've only seen one film. I still really liked it, but I just didn't love it. Hitchcock I always love, pretty much for the most part, his films. And this film is just, I think, one of the better ones I've seen so far. And it rightfully, it's acclaimed as one of the best British films. I would agree because I think it's one of the best films of all time. It's not quite on the level of his top 5 or anything like that for me, but the ones I've seen so far. But it really is a masterpiece, a flawless one, to be honest, and connected with it so much. The characters and everything. I was completely just on the edge of my seat for pretty much the whole film, and it's got a great comedy. It's just genius comedy, really. The script, just the situations, and all the twists and everything in this film, stunning. And it's just the character of Robert Donay. He plays just such a unique character. You could kind of say he's a bit like Cary Grant in North by Northwest, that kind of character. But yeah, it's just such a great character, and it's just constantly, every scene in this film is just flawless, really. And it takes it. At first, you wouldn't quite think. The first sort of 15 minutes are very different to the rest of the film, and it just gets better and better and better. And just the ending is really just great and warm. A touching film, even though it is a thriller and it's very short, but it establishes so much. All the characters are great, the relationships and everything. It's got so much charm and wit. It's a masterpiece. The 39 Steps. I'd have to give this film 100% plus tier 2. Yeah, I think it's an absolute masterpiece. You know, a lot of people wouldn't put it up with Hitchcock's best films. And you know, yeah, I think it is one of his better films, one of his best so far. I don't imagine it, you know, being overtaken too much with the rest of the films that I have to see of Hitchcock. You know, the ones I've not seen. I think this will, yeah, remain within a certain number, you know, bracket. And yeah, I absolutely love this film. You know, it's just great. The romance, as I've said, this just everything as well. The filmmaking, the cinematography, direction, editing, the soundtrack as well. Really great. The score, all the characters, even the minor characters along the way, always so memorable. And just yeah, the protagonist. It's just great. It really is, and then the romance comes into play, and it's just such an enjoyable adventure film. You know, thriller, mystery, and just the comedy as well. You know, it's just great, and the way that Hitchcock is able to kind of keep it constantly thrilling, but also inject so much in comedy into it and stuff. It's just genius, you know, and this film is genius. I love it, and yeah, for sure, yeah, it is one of the best British films ever made. Definitely, I agree with that, and for me, among the best films ever made. Thanks for watching my review of the 39 Steps. I think next up will probably, you know, in terms of Hitchcock, will be The Lady Vanishes, which I have seen as well. I look forward to reviewing that, and yes. I can't wait to do the rest, you know, of Hitchcock's films, and yeah, eventually, you know, it will probably be. It shouldn't be, you know, anytime soon. It may even be next year. I don't know. I'll do a full Hitchcock ranking. So that means all of his, you know, roughly 50 films. I'll be doing a ranking. That may be 2 different videos, but it will eventually be done. Because I already think this, you know, Hitchcock is a genius. I'm one of those people. And you know, he's just made so many masterpieces, and this is one of them. So thanks for watching my review of Hitchcock's The 39 Steps, an absolute masterpiece.